In today's video, we're going to be transforming this living room scene into something that looks a little bit more cinematic. Before we get started, my name is Mac and I own a photo and video production company. Here on my channel, I bring you videos sharing as much knowledge as I can to help you become a better creator. If that's something you're interested in, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below so you don't miss out on future uploads. Alright, so I recently dropped a new short film here on the channel, which if you haven't seen it, I highly suggest you go and watch it because it directly relates to the lighting breakdown that we are going to do today. I'll leave a link to the video down below or a card somewhere up on screen for you to go and check that short film out. It's kind of like a micro short film. It's only a minute long, so it won't take much of your time. So yeah, I definitely suggest go and give it a watch and then come back and watch the rest of this video. But anyway, a few days before we started shooting the short film, I decided to run a little test setup here in the studio in our living room space to see if my vision that I had in my head could come to life utilizing that space, which I wasn't sure if it was going to because as you can see, actually you can't really tell in this angle right here, but the way our studio is set up, the rooms are very long and narrow and the ceilings are very tall. So it's kind of hard to create depth from a lot of different angles. It's kind of limited in that sense. So I wanted to make sure that I could get the look that I wanted to go for before I had a bunch of people show up on the day of shooting and waste a bunch of people's time. I had my buddy Devin come to the studio and help me out one night by recreating this intro sequence that I had in my head. And yeah, we're just gonna get into the breakdown right now. I got my iPad and my Apple Pencil handy, ready to go. I'm gonna try to draw some things up and hopefully teach you guys a thing or two. So the first step of this process was finding my first frame of the introduction sequence. I knew that I wanted to shoot into the corner of the room to create as much depth as possible and utilize the longness of the room, the length of the room is what I'm trying to say. But I also really liked a few things about the corner of our living room. I like how our wall is completely white and we have a wooden ladder kind of leaning up in the corner, and we have these big dark gray curtains to cover the windows. It just creates a good little contrast there in the corner. And then I took one of our big plants and kind of moved it over by the ladder, and then it just created a really nice aesthetic in the background of the corner of the room. Made it feel a little bit more believable that it's an actual living room and not just like a studio space. Now, since our studio is kind of long and narrow, I didn't want to move a ton of our furniture around and create a headache for ourselves when shooting. I wanted to try to keep it as simple and easy as possible. So what we decided to do was just slide all of the furniture down a little bit in the room just to give us a little bit more room behind the couch that our main character is going to be sitting on, creating a little bit more separation between him and the background. All right, so now that we have established our introduction frame in this beginning sequence of the film, the next thing that we need to do is motivate our light source. And as you can see right here on the left-hand side of the frame, we have this really nice practical lamp on the side table next to the couch and the chair. And that is the light that we are going to be motivating to try to make people believe, make the viewer believe that that lamp is lighting our subject. So I wanted to have the overall feel of this video be a bit warmer. So I have the light bulb in the lamp set to around 3000 Kelvin. And the particular light bulb that I'm using in the lamp is like 10 or 15 bucks or so from my local Home Depot. I'll try to find a link to it and leave it down in the description below, but it's not an expensive light. It's not a film specific light, but it does connect to your phone via Wi-Fi and you can control the entire RGB spectrum and you can control how dim or how bright you can make it. So I really like these light bulbs. They're cheap. We have them all over our studio, and I highly suggest that if you're going to use any sort of practical light, always put a light bulb in the source so that way there you can control it 100% and not have to, work around that. But if for some reason you cannot afford to buy this light bulb, or you're on set one day and you don't have control of the light bulbs in the room, all you have to do is just set the exposure in the camera to the exposure of the light itself so that way there it's not blown out, and then you just light the rest of the room to fill the ambience. So since our practical light is in the left side of the frame right here, we want to make the viewer believe that he's being lit on this side of his face by this lamp, like I said before. So what I have off camera left here, right on top of the couch, is a big Falconized 24-inch TDX bicolor light, and this is just blasting a 3000 Kelvin light source right into the left side of our talent's face. I also have a grid on that light to help control with the spill in the rest of the room because, yeah, we're trying to control our light as much as possible. So now that we know that we have this big 2x2 LED light blasting a nice soft source into the left side of the frame right here, what I wanted to do next was add some negative fill on the right side of Talent. So I just took a sound blanket and I hung it right up here on this wall and just taped it to the wall. And what this did was eat up a ton of the light that was bouncing back in from the white walls that we have in the studio and just added a nice touch of contrast into the right side of the Talent. So now, in order to separate the subject from the background, I decided to boom out a tube light right over subject right here. And that was a Godox TL60 tube light. These are quickly becoming one of my favorite lights to use. I don't leave the house without them, right? Like, I bring these things everywhere and I use them to fill in certain areas of the frame here and there, and they come in handy. So if you do not have tube lights in your kit, I highly recommend that you pick some up because, yeah, they'll save your life. But I have a tube light boomed out right behind Talent right here, just blasting some nice 3000 Kelvin light right off the back of Talent's head just to separate him from the background. And the reason why I have this light set to 3000 Kelvin is to match the rest of the color temperatures of the ambience of the entire shot. Say hi to Evan, everyone. I bet you didn't even know he was behind me. Okay, bye Evan. Alright, so now that we have the key light and the hair light in place, I still felt like the background needed to be brought up a little bit with the levels just to create a little bit more depth and a little bit more separation between the subjects. So what I did was I added one more light, which is a Godox wand light, and I put it behind the couch right here, and I had it shining up into this tree in the corner this way with 3000 Kelvin as well, just to match the ambience of the room. Like I said before with the hair light, I wanted to match the ambience so that way there it all kind of feels cohesive. And just a quick tip, guys, when you start adding a bunch of lights to your scene, just mess around with the levels of each and just keep an eye on the camera and just go based off of what you think looks good, right? It's very easy to allow lights to get out of control. So I believe I had the levels set to this tube light around like 4%, and that wand light behind the couch was set to like 5%. So you don't need a ton of light to fill the room, but yeah, just mess around with the levels and whatever looks good to you, just roll with it. All right, so taking a look at the close-up frame here, the only thing that I changed in this shot was I brought the big falconized light a little bit closer to our Talent, so that way there I got a little bit more of a wrap around his face here, creating this nice Rembrandt lighting on the right side. And it just helped soften the light on his face. As you guys may or may not know, if you bring a light source closer to your subject, it actually becomes a softer source. So the bigger and the closer the source to the subject, the softer the light, and you can get this nice wrapping around subject's face, a nice fall off into the shadow side. And yeah, that's the only thing I changed for this frame in particular. All right, so let's just run it back to the beginning and recap from the top. The first thing that we're going to want to do is expose for our practical light. Once we expose for the practical light, we then bring in our key light. Once we had our levels with the key light all dialed in, we then added some negative fill on the right side of the frame. After that, we then added a hair light to separate the subject from the background. And then lastly, we added one more light to blast up into the back corner of the room, just to add a little bit more depth and separation overall in the frame. And that was pretty much it. Just a 4-light setup, nothing crazy. And yeah, this is the final look that I ended up with. And overall, I was pretty happy with the results, but I did feel like I needed to make a few tweaks and a few changes for the short film once we started shooting that on the day of. So we're gonna jump into those frames right now. And I'm just gonna kind of walk you guys through what I changed, what I did differently. And yeah, let's take a look at those. All right, so taking a look at the actual short film frames here now, as you can see, it's a completely different vibe. Well, not a completely different vibe, but it's much cooler than what I was going for originally. And that's because, I mean, it's a darker intro, right? He's watching the news about COVID yet again. 2 years later, COVID is still a thing. And yeah, he's just sick of it. So I didn't think that a really warm feel was, you know, the appropriate look to what I was going for with this. But I did keep the practical light right here, still blasting over here at 3000 Kelvin. but I just filled the room with cooler tones to create a little bit of color contrast, and then I just brought all the levels down a little bit. And yeah, I'm gonna walk you guys through that right now. So as far as the lighting setup goes, everything stayed pretty much exactly the same. I still have the Falconized light off camera left right here, blasting in 3000 Kelvin. I still have the Godox tube light up here, boomed out, blasting 3000 Kelvin off of our talent's head to create that rim light and give us a little bit of separation. But I did add a grid onto that light to help control the spill and keep the levels down in the room, because I did feel like at first when I tried this with Devin, that tube light was spilling all over the room and it was just creating too much warm lights in areas that I didn't want the light to be. The next thing I changed was the wand light that I have behind the chair here, and instead of blasting up 3000 Kelvin into the corner of the room, I had it set to like 4400, blasting up into this corner right here, just to create a cooler tone in the back of the room right there to help separate with all of the warm light. And I did keep that big sound blanket taped up on the wall right here to help eat up some of that light that was bouncing back in from our huge white walls. And I know I just colored that with red, but you get it, that's negative fill. And then the last thing that I decided to do with these frames was add a little bit of haze into the room, just to create a little bit more of that volumetric lighting, that more cinematic look, right? If you watch movies from Hollywood or Netflix shows or whatever, you notice that they utilize haze a ton, and it is something that I don't utilize enough. So I wanted to throw some haze into the room, see what it did. And yeah, I think I really like how this came out. And then moving into the close-up shot, same thing. All I did was take the big Falconized light, move it closer to the talent, still blasting 3000 Kelvin, but as you can see, the fall off of the light around his face is just much softer, and you know, it gives us this nice triangle of lights right here, the little Rembrandt lighting, which is what I was going for, but it just looks so much better. So yeah, let me get rid of these really quick. The Godox tube light that I had over here blasting into the back of his head to help separate him from the background, I think still looks great, and the grid definitely helped control the spill into the rest of the room. And then we also had, one more time, behind the couch down here was the Godox wand light, blasting this cooler light up into this area of the room, just helping, you know, give a little bit more of that color contrast that I was going for. And lastly, the negative fill right here on this wall, just helping eating up some of that light that was bouncing back in, creating a nice contrast in the image. All right guys, so that's pretty much it. I'm gonna wrap up the video here. Just a quick 4 lighting breakdown, taking your image from something that looked a bit boring to a bit more cinematic. And yeah, I hope this helped some of you. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the thumbs up button down below. Helps the channel a ton. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing for more content like this. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.